Good morning, folks. The real Captain Kirk here, live from Weather Trends 360 studio here in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. It is the 28th of October. Hard to believe that two-thirds of fall is pretty much gone. A ton to talk about today, so we're going to move at warp speed here. But we're going to talk about snow, the blob, retail sales, hurricane recap, drought, wildfires. Again, of course, the two-week outlook. So we will move quickly. Season-to-date snowfall continues to expand, mostly in the Rockies and the West. Still trending about the snowiest start in 10 years nationally, fifth most in 30 years. Not much in the east yet, but we may have some hint of that as we get into early November. But again, all that snow has been pretty much out in the western part of the country. Snow cover here this morning is at about 8.4% of the country. Again, most in 7 years. Average this time of year would be about 5%. But again, most of that snow, as you see, is out in the Rockies. So again, not much here in the eastern U.S. at this stage. Looking at water temperatures as of here this past weekend, the blob is kind of interesting. It's somewhat displaced. Normally we'd see this up in the Gulf of Alaska off of Canada, but it's getting a little to the west. And what that means, if you have a ridge of high pressure over the blob, which is typical, you'd have a downstream trough. And unfortunately, that right now, at least, that downstream trough is more in the Rocky Mountains as opposed to the East Coast, where if the blob was, again, a little further to the east, we'd have that trough a little further to the east. So this could be a sign of winter, which again, most of that stormy weather in the central part of the U.S. As opposed to the East Coast, but time will tell. Still pretty much in a La Nada phase here. Most of the models keep it just below a weak El Nino, if not weakening into a La Nada phase here as we go through the winter here. Looking at last week here, 20 through 26 October for our retail customers here. This is year-over-year trends, temperatures. So much warmer year-on-year in the eastern half of the country. Obviously, that cold blob in the Rocky Mountains. So the U.S. is 2.7 Fahrenheit warmer than last year, quite a bit above average. Europe, off the scale here, 2.2 Fahrenheit versus last year warmer, and warmest in 30 years, so much above average across most of Europe. Really most of more toward Eastern Europe. Spain actually not too bad. China, a little bit warmer than last year, above average. And that map bottom left is, again, the trends versus average for last week on a national scale. Looking at fall to date, again, about 60, almost 66% done. Drier, much drier, again, across the southwest, south part of Texas, into the east. Making some headway here as of late, but again, been a pretty dry fall. 1.9 Fahrenheit warmer than last year to date for fall across the U.S. as a whole. Sixth warmest in 30 years, so quite a bit above average on a national scale. Precip about 26% less than last year, but still eighth wettest in 30 years above average. Looking at these trends again, this is fall national trends year over year. Again, the way our retail customers like to look at it. So, again, I always say 1 degree hotter, you're going to sell, less coats, gloves, mittens, those types of things. So the good news is we're getting a big, huge surge. The biggest surge of the fall season to date is happening as we speak. So we've got a good 7 to 10 day stretch here of much colder year-on-year temperatures of 5 to 7 degrees colder. So you'll be pantry loading for the soups and the hot cocos and the hot cereals and thinking about the sweaters and the gloves and the mittens and all that stuff here the next 10 days. And then probably a milder trend as we get into the middle of November into maybe even into mid to late November. So again, a good surge here for retail sales. Looking at the hurricane season recap, we've got about a month to go here, but it's starting to wind down pretty quickly here. A little misleading here. We've had 16 named storms according to the Hurricane Center, but 7 of those storms lasted less than 1 day. Back in the olden days, these storms may never even had a name. So a little misleading, again, to say 16 storms. Obviously, the big ones were Dorian, made landfall in the Bahamas, and then obviously Humberto also impacted Bermuda with, again, 100-plus mile-an-hour winds. So those were the two biggies. Again, 2 of these storms didn't even last more than 6 hours. In fact, one lasted about 1 hour. So, again, a little misleading here on the totals here, but U.S. pretty much has dodged a bullet. Other than some flooding impacts this year, we have not had the catastrophic issues we've had with the Harveys and the Michaels and the Florences as of years past. Looking at drought here, again, back in mid-May, we only had about 8% of the country with drought, and as of right now, we're up to about 37% with dry to drought-like conditions. We do expect this to expand as we get into summer 2020, looking for about 56% of the country to have dry to drought conditions. So this will get worse. There really is no drought in California per se, but obviously we're dealing with some pretty epic fires here. North of the San Francisco Bay Area. The big ones here is the Kincaid fire, and again, evacuating tens of thousands of people. Some of these fire pictures are just absolutely horrifying. Again, this is a bridge engulfed in smoke and fire. Again, just can't imagine. This was the smoke projections here. You can see that big fire north of San Francisco, and then getting some smoke is going all the way through the desert Southwest and even parts of the central U.S. So if you see it kind of a hazy, smoky out there in the southwest, you can blame some of these fires. We'll animate the 6-day snowfall map here, looking at the snowfall, another system going through the Rockies. They've been the big winners here so far this year. Here's another one going through the plains, and then another surge coming into the Rockies as we get into around the 30th, Thursday, moves into plain. Might actually get a decent snow in Iowa, west of Chicago. And we'll go through these here one more time, and then it kind of fizzles with weekend. So here's Monday, today. We get into midweek, another blast. Big storm probably around Thursday. We'll see here in Iowa. We can get about 8+ inches of snow. And then kind of fizzles here as we get toward the weekend. Looking at this week overall, we'd say it's about, this is the big blast we've been talking about, 6.4 degrees colder than last year. So it's a pretty epic blast, third coldest in 30 years for the nation as a whole. As the model's been hinting at, they try to bring it to the East Coast. We just never seem to, each week they try to get it here, and it just never seems to happen. We will get some of this cold weather later toward the weekend, but again, East Coast is still the warm spot. Little map inset left is temps versus last year. Again, so pretty much similar to the temps versus average. Rainfall's wettest in 3 years, third wettest in 30 years, so quite a bit of wet weather ahead of this cold front. Snowfall with that system moving through the Rockies in the Midwest will be the most in 8 years, above average nationally. Looking at next week here, 4 through 10 November, again, finally looks like some of that cold will get into the Northeast. In fact, we may get our first bigger snows in New England late in the period here. So 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th of November, there might be some snow in New England, the higher elevation. Been kind of a drought here as of late. This may be a short-lived blast. You can already see the big warm-up in the west. Overall, for the nation whole, we say it's just a little bit warmer than last year, but still 10th coldest in 30 years, below average. Drier than last year, but still on the wet side, 8th wettest in 30 years, with snowfall less than last year. But again, we'll watch for the Northeast as we get late in the 7, 8, 9, 10 November time frame. So with that, folks, we hope you have a great week, and we'll be back here this time next week.